The possible agenda items, and I'm just speaking now extemporaneously, is I think a real problem is developing at a political and also at a political level over the parts of the extreme right are now, this is maybe not the most felicitous choice of words, but are hijacking the critique of Israel. And I do think a problem is developing as to how a left distinguishes its critique of Israel from the Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, uh, that whole part of the point on the political spectrum. And I'm getting a little bit nervous that there isn't a distinction between the two ends of the spectrum is becoming very blurry. And for reasons which are, obvious, people are very happy that Tucker Carlson is giving publicity to children who have been, suffered amputations and other sorts of crimes by Israel. But I do think there has to be some line drawn. Otherwise, we can end up on the side of the spectrum regarding Jews that could become very, very, very problematic. Uh, so that's one item. Another item is this recent UN Security Council resolution, which effectively and literally handed over title of Gaza to Donald J. Trump, and negated, annulled about 70 years of UN and international law um, framework for understanding the conflict. So that's a second item that I think might warrant attention. I'm sure others will leap to mind, but those are the ones I'm thinking of now.
Are we rolling already, or is this just preliminary?
We're recording, but
we are
we can
rolling.
always exclude.
Ordinarily, I do like an intro, but we could just take what Norman just said and roll with that. I had
David, is it okay if I introduce a couple more agenda items and then maybe Bruce or you?
I have a question here that was going to be the first one that addresses Norman's first point. But yeah, go ahead.
Bruce and I were talking earlier, and what I was suggesting was that I play the naive goy here and ask about a couple of things. One is Veblen's essay of 1919 about the intellectual preeminence of the Jews in modern Europe, what nationalism or Zionism might have to do with that. And then on the other hand, Peter Beinart's discussion of the possibility of how the crisis in Gaza and Israel may require, or at least imply or portend, a radical reorientation of Judaism as such. And that would, I mean, there's all kinds of questions that attend that, but all right, something like that. And then so we can focus on the question of Palestine here.
Right.
But I'm anyway.
Well, I have something to say about all three things. Jim's yours, and Norman, both of yours. But I don't know, David. Maybe you want to do your intro, and then we can get going.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. Let me just do a very quick thing. This is the Politics and Letters podcast. I am David Barfield with Jim Livingston, and today we have with us Bruce Robbins, who is Old Dominion Foundation Professor in the Humanities at Columbia University and the author of numerous books, most recently Criticism and Politics, A Polemical Introduction, and Atrocity, A Literary History. And Norman Finkelstein is a political scientist who received his doctorate from Princeton University. He is the author of numerous books on the political history of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. They include The Holocaust Industry, Reflections on the Exploitation of Jewish Suffering, Gaza, An Inquest into Its Martyrdom, and most recently, I'll Burn That Bridge When I Get to It, Heretical Thoughts on Identity Politics, Cancel Culture, and Academic Freedom. And with that, thanks for...
I correct you right away.
Yes.
It's not that I'm going to make a habit of this, but I have a book coming out in February from Melville House called Who's Allowed to Protest? And I want to mention it because people might buy it, and that would be great, but also because it's relevant to some of the stuff that we're going to talk about.
Okay. And I lifted this from your webpage, so...
It's on my webpage. I know.
You have to get to that. Well, let me just get to this first question that I had, and this was something that I think will get us into Norman's first point. So I say this kind of, I don't even know how to put it exactly, but I'll say it like this. As a Jew, right? I've had it up to here with the term as a Jew, prefacing any criticism of everything. I don't know what it does for us politically. I got three reasons. We got our present, just very briefly, our present company, both Norman and Bruce have been attacked for their Jewishness, right? This is not uncommon you say, I'm a Jew, and somebody else says, well, you're not really the kind of Jew that we like. Second, Rabbi Shmuley, we're all familiar with this guy, Shmuley Boteach, he also gets to say as a Jew. And then he comes out with his position, and there we are. We're all just sitting around with no real way of making sense of what's right or wrong, or is it a good argument or not. But the third thing is really just a general point about, I guess, the efficacy of a political idea. And is it a reasonable or an effective strategy you come at to try to make universalist claims from a particularist position or particularist standpoint? So I say, as a Jew, therefore I'm going to make this broader claim about rights and about justice. So that's just, my sense is it's pretty ineffective, but I was wondering what you guys think of that, or is it a valid question even? I have and this is all respect to Jewish Voice for Peace. I get the idea that, a lot of us want to distinguish ourselves from right-wing Zionism or even liberal Zionism. You want to present this idea that not all Jews are the same, and I understand that, but I wonder how effective it is as a starting point.
Well, I'll say something quick. I mean, I think I can feel where you're coming from, David. I'm not sure that I would have started speaking as a Jew if so many other Jews were not speaking as Jews and saying things that I found really repulsive. So I just felt like I had obvious, everybody knows this. And I guess the question is really how bad anybody should feel about it, or I should feel about it. It's because they're speaking as Jews that the rest of us have to speak up as Jews just to tell the world we're not all like them. Lots of us, maybe 40% now feel perfectly happy, being critical of Israel and being Jews. I think this is for Jim and the other Goyim, if I can say,
He's an honorary Jew anyway.
He barely. I'll let him speak for himself, but no, I mean, I think I do it because they're doing it. It's just that simple.
Right.
I think there are several aspects to it. In the early days, and I'm talking about quite a long time ago now, it was a weapon. I won't say how powerful it was. It was a weapon to refute the claim that Israel was acting in the name of Jews and acting with their permission, acting with their support, and so forth, to be able to say, well, I'm Jewish, and well, no, Israel is not acting in my name. I think that particular argument is not as important right now because there's a very large Jewish constituency, as uh, Bruce just said, which is vocally, actively or passively opposed to what Israel is doing. That constituency is a known quantity now. So the claim to be a Jew and opposing Israel is less, in my opinion, significant right now than it was perhaps a half century ago. But then there is a second aspect, and the aspect is what kinds of authority does being a Jew endow you with in an argument? Look, knowledge has many aspects to it. There's a historical record, there's a documentary record, and there's also an ex an experiential component to knowledge. So if I would be very averse to speaking about what is it like now living in the West Bank. Uh, you know, that to me, that's an area where I don't command authority and where one should defer to those who experience that reality on a daily or a life basis. So I think your identity in that particular case here being living in the West Bank, it does carry weight. And it should be not necessarily deferred to because different people have different experiences under the occupation, but it's certainly a valid piece, so to speak, of knowledge. But when it comes to things like the historical record, the documentary record, speaking as a Jew or speaking as an Arab or speaking as a Muslim or speaking as a Palestinian, in my opinion, carries zero authority with it. That's a scholarly endeavor trying to reconstruct the historical record, and you don't get any extra weight on your opinion because of your identity. So there are places in the realm of knowledge where I believe identity carries weight, and there are realms of knowledge where identity, in my opinion, carries zero weight whatsoever. None.
Yeah, so just to address your point, Norman, from earlier about the Christian nationalists that we're seeing uh, taking the uh, taking an anti-Zionist or an anti-Israel perspective, I thought that perhaps a way of dealing with them is rather than saying as a Jew, thus and such, I would say something like as a socialist or as a as a person with a particular political perspective. That's what I would want to push more. That might differentiate us from the right wingers, but I
Uh,
don't have really a great answer for that.
I,
But
well,
isn't
maybe we should first recapitulate what the question is, because I don't believe that Bruce Robbins was there when I made my just brief agenda items. What I was, I'm not sure, Bruce, you'll correct me if I'm repeating myself. What I said was there's now you might call it, this might be too strong a word, but there is a ferocious attack now being launched against the state of Israel and Israeli actions. And that ferocious attack is coming from a quarter which, until very recently, was either silent on or supportive of Israel, namely the far right in the United States. So if you were to say, who are the most influential persons now speaking out against Israel? I think by a wide margin, it's the far right. It's Candace Owens. It's Tucker Carlson. It's Nick Fuentes. And they're now dominating the media critique of Israel and Israeli actions and Jews who support Israel and Israeli actions. And it's leaving me with an uncomfortable feeling because I think there has to be a clear delineation, not only of there's not only an intersection of criticism, which there is, if Tucker Carlson goes to Gaza, or in this case goes to Qatar, and he videotapes scenes of children with all of these ghastly wounds that have been inflicted on them. I would be the last person on earth to criticize that. In fact, a person wrote me last night saying that that Tucker Carlson video, I guess it's an hour and a half, uh, he said it garnered 20 million views, which means by now it may have garnered enough views to about be one tenth of the United States' population, which is a very significant number. And I am getting a little bit uncomfortable, if I might use that word, by our newfound allies, and allies obviously in scare quotes, because that critique of Israel, if it is harnessed by the far right, can, in my opinion, go in very ugly directions. I am, as you know, I am not an anti-Semitism monger or a Holocaust monger, but one has to be sensitive to the fact, in my opinion, that it could go in a very ugly direction, not least because Israel has done very ugly things, and those ugly things have been suppressed and repressed by its supporters in the United States, and now it's bursting forth.
But Norm,
It's bursting forth.
but
And so I'll just finish up and then I'll let you go. So I do believe there has to be some delineation of what separates our criticism of Israel as well as American Jews who have supported what's been going on versus the far right.
okay, I couldn't agree more. I mean, absolutely. But doesn't it behoove us to move backward and ask David's question all along? I mean, America First was saturated by anti-Semitism in the 1930s. I mean, we all know this, right? So that when Pat Buchanan picks up on that language and those themes, he gets accused by his comrades on the right of anti-Semitism with good reason, right? So that this is a not even an undercurrent. It is a powerful stream within this broader river of the right. I don't think we should be surprised by this at all. And yes, the way for us to what confront it seems pretty obvious, and that is to call on the socialist politics, the politics of democracy, in confronting these people. I mean, no, am I being too obvious here?
Well, Candace Owens, I mean, I'm no expert with her, but from what I gleaned from a lot of her comments was that the thing that really got her revved up about this was the treatment of Christians
Hmm.
in in Israel, in Jerusalem especially. But I think Norman's point about as it you do have these folks, I wouldn't trust them farther than I could throw them because they seem very fickle, politically. I mean, and I guess that comes back to the commitment to us a lowercase d democratic politics that people tend to be more committed to. That might be the way, something to latch onto. But strictly speaking, they seem I don't really understand where they come from half the time because it seems very arbitrary, their concerns. Not always, but
But you recognize, of course, that it may seem arbitrary, capricious, and fickle, but if it gains traction
yeah, yeah,
and it appears as if you can build a movement around it, it becomes a real problem. I don't want to overstate or overuse the Nazi analogy, but here I think one point is pertinent, or one analogy is pertinent. Namely, the Nazis until 1929, the Great Crash, they were an utterly marginal phenomenon in Germany. In typical elections, they got about 5% of the vote. And it's very easy to plot the growth of the Nazi Party. After the crash in 1929, it went up to 18%. It went from 5 to 18, and then it gradually increased. And the reason was because the Nazis seemed like they had a solution to the economic problems plaguing Germany. Now, up until Hitler's election, the Jewish aspect or the anti-Semitic aspect was what you might call an add-on to the Nazi platform. It wasn't central. But once they got into power, then what was not central to their electoral victory became, as we all know, a uh, a catastrophe for Jews. I say that because there is now a momentum building on the right that is highly critical of Israel, which it ought to be. But it has elements mixed into it. I'll just give you one example. So from now, the infamous interview between Piers Morgan and Nick Fuentes. So Piers Morgan is asking him, so you say Hitler was really cool. Do you really believe that? And Nick Fuentes says, yeah, he was real cool. He was real cool. And the next day or 2 days later, there's a panel of 5 people on Piers Morgan to uh, do a Monday morning quarterbacking of that interview. And one of the people on the panel is this fellow named Glenn Greenwald. And Glenn Greenwald says, oh, Nick was just being transgressive. He was just being transgressive. He was mocking taboos. I'm thinking to myself, are you fucking out of your mind? Have you fucking lost your mind? Oh, he's being transgressive about gas chambers. Ha 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 ha. Very funny.
That
I,
is
you
case
know,
of pot calling the kettle black, because well is the one who's trying to be provocative all the time, and how stupid he sounds when he does it. Anyway, I have other things to say, but go
so
ahead.
so I do worry about where things are headed because so much of what they say is totally valid, the far right. I don't include Nick Fuentes and Hitler being cool. No, we don't go there. But number one, what Israel has done. Number two, that it gets away with it with impunity. And number three, it gets away with it impunity because of the support of a large sector of organized American Jewry. And that's all true. And number four, if you dare criticize it, then they come down very hard on you. And that's one of Candace Owens' laments and Tucker Carlson, how they're being accused of this and accused of that because they've criticized Israel. So I do think there is a significant, I won't call it dire, a significant need for a clear delineation of where what we say does not intersect with what they say. The intersection I get and I support. As I said, when my friend told me 20 million people viewed that video, I said, God bless Tucker Carlson. They should see what was done to those children. But I'm very concerned about the agenda to which that's attached.
If 20 million people really watch the Tucker Carlson uh, show and see the amputated children, and so my strongest feeling is this shows some possibility of cracking the MAGA support for Israel, which has been, it's been Trump policy. Of course, it was also Biden policy, but um, any crack like that for me is welcome.
I agree.
So, just in terms of actual consequences, and I would think the Israelis would be scared.
They are.
Um, I think Nick Fuentes really is an admirer of Hitler and really is an anti-Semite and needs to be called out as an anti-Semite. Um, and I think especially if we, speaking as Jews, remind everybody what an anti-Semite he is, we are going to get heard. This is an example of us speaking as Jews and getting heard. But in terms of the actual consequences, I mean, you're a political scientist, Norman. I'm not. You probably have smarter things to say about the likelihood of the far right um, move turning into or continuing and advancing on the movement that Trump has been the leader of after Trump. I don't think Trump's support for Israel is really in doubt, and he's probably willing to ignore elements of his base. I don't know, but if this means some kind of crack in the solid,
I agree with that. But I'm saying that I recognize this is like on the order of grandma had wheels should be a baby carriage. But if there's an economic crash, which is, I think, plausible, certainly not certain, but certainly plausible, I could easily see a far right movement gaining traction in significant ways in terms of voting power on a platform platform in which the Jews are salient and not for good reason.
well, as Jim says, there's a history there, and I think those people have not gone away, and
Sure.
out from under the rock under Trump, right? I mean, they've been able to express themselves not just about the Jews, but about anybody they have
Look,
that.
we have an overall very big problem. You know what the overall very big problem is? The top 10 and maybe the top 20 podcasters are all of the right and the far right. There's not one leftist person who clocks in anywhere near these people. Anywhere near. There's not one person of the left. If you were to name the top 10, it would be Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson. I will admit Joe Rogan is a grayer area. Andrew Tate, Ben Shapiro, and so on. You couldn't name one person on the left.
Well, what about David Barfield? I'm sorry, you're
Yeah, what the fuck, man? Come on.
Doesn't that also suggest, though, that, well, I mean, I don't want to put down my fellow citizens on the right, but doesn't that suggest that the right is more illiterate than the left? I mean, that is to say that they have to get their knowledge through an oral culture as opposed to a written one. I
I
mean,
don't think that in the great scheme of things, I don't
no?
think that makes much difference.
All right.
First of all, unfortunately, the left has to get its points across through oral culture also. The number of people who actually read books, I think, can safely be fit on one of your hands. So that's not an issue. There is, I think, an issue. Glenn Greenwald said about Nick Fuentes. You know what he said? He said he's a very smart guy. He's a very well read. Yeah. Can
All
one
right. I take it
person
back.
can you cite to me, can you name for me one interview in which Nick Fuentes ever mentioned a book he read? I'm curious. I've
I've
never
never
seen
seen
it.
an interview with him, so I don't know.
This is, it is a, it's, the issue of literacy is a problem. And there I think the left is much better. I mean, it's not wholly better, but you take something like Crystal Ball or Brianna Joy Gray, they are readers. They're good, and they are very prepared when they do an interview. So I agree. There's something on the left that's better, but in general, no, reading culture has declined across the board.
From the
There's no there's no pride in it. Bruce Robbins goes back as far as I do, maybe a wee bit longer. In the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s, even with the neocons, there was what you might call a pride of craft.
Yeah.
They wrote an essay. Of course, there was a lot of ego invested in the essay, but the essay was always written with elegance. You expected there was going to be all this chatter on the left, right, and center about the essay, but there was pride of craft. You had to have read, you had to have had knowledge of the English language, you had to have read the classics. It was a different ballpark. Now, first of all, nobody writes except tweets. Nobody writes essays.
Hey, Bruce has got 3 books in the last 20 minutes. Come on.
something about just to say very quickly, so the right has, it seems that you remember in the 90s and early 2000s, Rush Limbaugh, he was, and actually reactionary radio. When I lived in New York, I used to go through sports, fascists, traffic, just go AM dial. What's that, Bruce?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think that the format of just blurting out a bunch of crap that they make up, which is kind of the reactionaries' MO, right? It's a much easier marketable form of entertainment.
You can do it in kind of the dueling manner of Charlie Kirk, where, I mean, of the dead, we should say no evil, but I'd say plenty of
Yeah,
evil.
we could.
I mean, just make up shit, which works well in the back and forth because he knows you don't know. And I mean, there have been analyses of his debate style.
Right.
They're kind of horrifying. And there's no question around a certain amount of knowledge that he's acquired. But the reason it's successful is, it's a put down, right? I mean, he can sort of win the gladiatorial contest. And unfortunately, that really works.
The best critique of Charlie Kirk is on South Park.
Is it?
Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting to watch when he came up against somebody who was knowledgeable. He debated Brianna Joy Gray.
Wow.
And he started by assuming black women know nothing.
My God.
But about a half hour into the debate, you know what? He stopped debating. He just asked her questions.
Oh.
He knew he couldn't hold his own. She just shattered, shredded, battered him. It was a very interesting sight to behold. He tried to play the hysterical black woman card. And because, Brianna's animated when she speaks, like yours truly. But when that didn't work, and he kept on referring to her having gone to Harvard, at one point, in a very understated way, Brianna Joy said, "Well, you keep mentioning I went to Harvard. Do you have a chip on your shoulder?" It was a lethal blow. It was no, it was a lethal blow. And he didn't know from that point he couldn't recuperate because he thought he was going to play the hysterical black woman card, and she was just too smart.
Well, he also went into, I think it was Oxford. He went to the Oxford Debate Club, and these guys just like a cat and a mouse. They just swatting him around, and I don't even think he recognized just what was happening initially because he kept at it. Or why would he even agree to do something like that?
They don't recognize because they have this cult following.
Right.
There's another fellow, a thing, he goes by the name of Destiny,
Oh,
and he has this flock. I call it Destiny's um, dingleberries. And whenever he does a debate, he launches his dingleberries on the comments section to just say how brilliant he was.
Mm.
So the first 200 or 300 comments are from his people, and then he walks away thinking he won the debate. And they all do that. Nick Fuentes has his flock,
Mm.
and their job is to go on the comments section and claim victory for their person. So they really don't know that they live in a bubble world, the world of their cult. They're a
Do
cult
we have
leader.
one of those, David?
Why?
Do we have something like that? Do we have a constituency on that order?
We got
Only.
I have like my friends watch this,
Yeah.
and now we'll branch out. You know,
Okay.
we're looking to branch out.
Go ahead, David.
No, go you, Bruce. Did you have something?
I was going to move in a completely different direction, which
Go ahead.
is too gossipy, really, for this high level. I'm
I'm
wondering,
if I might ask Bruce and the others a question. Where do you feel Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, where do where do you believe they have gone in their criticism of Israel and American Jews, which, in your opinion, has crossed a red line?
to be very honest, I haven't been following them. I know it's terrible, but Nick Fuentes just is too much of an out anti-Semite for me to pay any attention to anything he says. And the others, I'm trusting you. I don't know. I'm sorry. I've nothing.
I've never, yeah, same thing with me. I've never seen these people, so I don't know. I mean, I've heard about it and I've seen clips, and I did actually watch Tucker Carlson for about, I don't know, about 6 months when he was still on Fox. And that was fascinating because, well, for two reasons. One, he was peddling that race replacement thing, which is at its heart, it seems to me, racialized and at least subliminally anti-Semitic. And the other thing he was doing, though, was pressing this very pointed, articulate critique of the elites. He used the phrase ruling class over and over and over again to describe what is now goes by the name of globalist elites. But there too, there's always a connotation of anti-Semitism because who's the globalist elites except the bankers who control everything from behind the scenes and stuff. I mean, it's like, um, I mean, I can't speak to the Candace Owens and the rest of them, but Carlson has always been, right there. I mean, you can't believe in this great replacement business and not have some sort of, I don't know, some dimension of. Go ahead, David.
No, I just say, you mentioned Greenwald earlier, and one of my issues with that guy is that, he does not understand ideology, and he doesn't understand the history of it, and that and I think with these right wingers that I don't want to say it's the cliche of the broken clock being right. They strike upon things that are correct. But when we open this up and I talked about particularism versus the universalism, I kind of find these things to be important ultimately in a person's overall argument because it depends where it comes from. And if Tucker Carlson's criticisms of Israel are because he hates Jews or he thinks that there's something diabolical about the Jews or any of them think that, that's a problem. And I think that Norman's worries, if these guys are really that powerful and they have political sway, I mean, we don't know what can happen. We've watched, we're watching a genocide right now. There's no reason to assume that, people say things have to get worse before they get better, but things could just continue to get worse. And I don't see anything in their arguments, and I don't watch them religiously, but, I've seen enough of them to know that they don't have anything. There's no democracy in what they're saying.
Right.
They are pointing to really horrible behaviors and they don't like it, but I mean, to me, that seems like a pretty low bar.
And they have no solution. I mean, their only
No,
solution is more ranting and more roundup of immigrants. I mean, what?
take a very basic thing. Like how many times has Tucker Carlson says we need Medicare for all in this country? Like
I don't.
they don't support any of these things. They don't support any kind of pro-social policy.
Right,
Um,
right.
so it's all very, it just seems very, this is what I meant by the arbitrary stuff. It just seems very in the moment, whatever's getting them worked up. I, I do agree that you can take what they say that, you know, that is correct or decent and use it. But man, that's a rough group to like link up with.
But isn't it? I mean, isn't it pretty clear by now that these people are seizing on? It's not arbitrary in the sense that they're seizing on this idea of America first
Mhm.
to enforce a homogeneity that has been literally foreign to the United States of America since what 1650, for God's sake. So, I mean, it's not. I think there's a direct cause and effect here. There's not. I mean, there's nothing deviationist about it. If that's probably the wrong word here, but you know what I mean? This is a very solid component of the Republican Party for quite some time. And these people are not returning to the fold necessarily, but they're stepping back into what used to be the mainstream of the party. So
Very different from the names we've been talking about, but somebody closer to my own fears about the way things are going, and that's Barry Weiss.
Yeah.
yeah.
Barry, because as far as I know, not that I've paid a lot of attention since she was an undergrad at Columbia, when I did pay some attention, I don't think she's like an instrument of the Republican Party, right? But now she's an instrument.
Excuse me, I can't hear you.
Barry Weiss, sorry.
Yeah, okay. She's an instrument of.
I don't think she's a Republican or allies herself with the far right. I think she'd probably even call herself a liberal. But she's terrifying because of the people behind her and because she's been put in charge of CBS News,
Right.
the kind of Zionist that she is. So I just wonder whether, I don't know, is it worth putting somebody like that into the conversation?
Look, there's two aspects to the Barry Weiss phenomenon. There's the attempt to monopolize the media on behalf of a Israel Jewish agenda, and that's being promoted by the likes of Larry Ellison, Bill Ackman, and many others. So that's one aspect of it. And that's an aspect which I would say it's uneven, it's danger, because I think most people have not watched CBS News since Walter Cronkite, which is about 100 years ago now. So, uh, so that danger could be but then there's also the attempts by Larry Ellison and others to purchase TikTok and the other social media, and that will make a big difference. There's no question about that. One shouldn't trivialize it. But there's a second side, Bruce. So Tucker Carlson, in his most recent monologue, his interview, or an interview, I think it was, he said, in a fair world, in a world based on meritocracy, he said, Barry Weiss wouldn't have climbed above being a secretary. Now, that's what he said. Now, of course, that was misogynistic and it was elitist and everything else, but it was no holds barred. He said she was just being appointed. She doesn't know anything about journalism, and she's never written an article. How did he say it was just obviously because of her pro-Israel politics. So, on the one hand, she's been put in a position of, let's call it quasi power, CBS News, and has a very ugly agenda. But on the other hand, it's open season on her.
Wow.
Everybody is mocking her. I mean, on the right, they're mocking her and saying, how did this, he says, he not only attacked, he said, Barry Weiss is stupid. And frankly, I happen to agree with that. With all due respect to the school where you hold the Old Dominion chair of whatever, I cannot for the life of me figure out how she got into Columbia. Her only redeeming characteristic seems to be her earrings. So I don't know how she got in, but she is stupid. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say, I read her little Hallmark card-sized book. And it's such a revolting little item. Just give me 1/2 second.
I'm so glad I brought this up.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say Norman's on a roll today, though. Wow. I guess we're not going to get back to Veblen, huh?
Well,
Well, we can.
She's just such a revolting. You remember there was the killings at the Tree of Life Synagogue, and she happened to attend that synagogue. So here was a peg for her to write a book.
Right.
This is how the book ends. The last paragraph. There are many forces in our world insisting again that all Jews must die. But there is a force far, far greater than that. And that is the force of who we are. We are a people descended from slaves who brought the world ideas that changed the course of history. One God, human dignity, the sanctity of life, freedom itself. That is our inheritance. That is our legacy. We are the people commanded to bring light into this world. The only thing I could think of, the only peroration I could think of was Zeke Heil. I mean, what is this? What is this? She's such a zero. So when Tucker Carlson went after her, I thought, yeah, he's got a point. He also went after, incidentally, know who else he named along with Barry Weiss? It was interesting. He named Bill Ackman.
Huh.
This is really throwing down the gauntlet
Yeah.
because now you're going against the billionaire Jewish class.
can we do a class analysis here? I mean, Norman, what you just said was kind of consoling to me because I took you to be saying the real power is bubbling up from below via social media, and the mainstream media like CBS really is powerless. I'm just translating now because nobody watches it anymore. But the other way to divvy it up would be to say, it's the Bill Ackmans and the Ellisons with the big money who are to turn that into power, and Barry Weiss is an instrument of them.
Yeah, she is.
So Trump's coalition, it's got its populist side and it's got its big money side, and forces those things to disengage with each other. That creates cracks in that coalition. We have to be somewhat glad of. I mean, the obvious thing to say, they are not anti-immigrant, right? I mean, the way that the MAGA base is anti-immigrant, and there's the possibility for things to be thrown into question, and in that way, I can't think of words today. Just
Where would you place Barry Weiss in that, the populist versus the? I mean, she's obviously the instrument of the billionaire class, then.
saying, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
She's the instrument of the Jewish billionaire class.
Yeah.
But there's another billionaire class which is not Jewish, and a large number of them support Tucker Carlson. And he is very upfront now. They have power, that Bill Ackman's. And now there is, as I said, a throwing down of the gauntlet to go after him. And I think I think he's going to have a hard time replying because what Israel did the last 2 years, it committed genocide in Gaza, but it did a lot of damage to the reputation of Jews.
Yeah.
And it's now, I won't call it open season, but people feel very free about their criticism now. They feel that, well, it's a mixed bag. Bruce is in a university setting, so people feel less free there than actually they felt before October 7th. On the other hand, I notice in my students, now I have to say the students are self-selecting. They chose my class because they know it's me. But the kind of very intelligent students, by the way, the kind of vehemence that they speak of quote unquote Zionism. And sometimes they say, guys, give me a chance. I'm going to lose my job if you keep this up because they bring it up in any possible setting, any possible classroom context. They bring up their loathing of quote unquote Zionism. That, people have been freed up about saying certain things. And that's what explains someone like Tucker Carlson ridiculing Barry Weiss and Bill Ackman. You couldn't have done that 2 years ago.
Does this remind us of something though? The split within the Nazi Party that you were referring to earlier, Norman, that between 1933 and 35, the virulently populist anti-Semitic wing does divide between, there's a working class base in the Nazi Party, and it is cleaved off in the Night of the Long Knives. And thereafter, the anti-Semitic program becomes the predominant one. Is that what we're looking at? That
I,
kind of
I don't know that particular periodization, and I can't explain the gradually, incrementally escalating attacks on Jews. That part I can't really explain. What I do know is, because I studied it fairly closely at a certain point in my life, what I do know is that a fairly marginal phenomenon, namely the Nazi Party, and even the anti-Semitic aspect of Nazism was fairly marginal until 1929. That once the crash came and once Germany was shattered, um, the movement took off. And what was an add-on, I'm using the expression now of Ian Kershaw, who's very knowledgeable on the subject. He said that the anti-Semitic aspect was an add-on. If you look at the election results, very few people voted for the Nazis because of the anti-Semitism. They voted on it because it looked like a path forward economically. But that add-on became ultimately lethal. So it does concern me what's happening now. And it's concerning in part because I don't see a viable left that has carved out a distinction on the question of Jews and Israel, that has carved out a distinction between itself and the newly surging ultra-right criticism of Israel and American Jews. I don't see that it has done that. And if there's no distinction, the areas of agreement are going to become very fuzzy. What exactly? Look, I'm the first one to say Jews are the most wealthy economic power in the ethnic religion, what they call it, religious ethnic group in the U.S. Jews are very well organized. I say that, oh, that's a tradition among Jews, the community organization, what they call the Kehillah. Jews are very well organized. They are very wealthy. They have, they had, until in my opinion, what happened in Gaza, they had what you might call Holocaust immunity from any criticism. And that made a lethal brew. It made a lethal brew. Um, So if I have been on Candace Owens' program, I was interviewed by her for 2 hours and 44 minutes, which according to the producers was the longest interview she ever did. And I was criticized afterwards by people who said you did not distinguish yourself enough from her. You kept saying, I agree with that point. I agree with that point. Because I did agree with the points. I couldn't pretend as if I disagreed, but there were places where she went. She said all the survivors of the Nazi Holocaust were actually Russian Bolsheviks who had murdered Jews and then pretended to be survivors of the Nazi Holocaust. Well, of course, there the paths diverged. And I was pretty emphatic on the issue of the Nazi Holocaust did happen. Um, and I said, that's why I agree with you. I think a large number of the people who call themselves Holocaust survivors, I do believe they were fakes. They capitalized on the Holocaust industry when it took off. But I said, that just proves my point. The Nazi Holocaust was very efficient. The best students of the subject described it as an assembly line, industrial style extermination. And if it was an assembly line, industrial style extermination, guess what? Very few people survived. But there was a period when, if you walked the streets of New York, every third person who had a European accent claimed that he or she was a Holocaust survivor. They were not. My mother used to exclaim in deep frustration and disgust. She used to say, if everybody who claims to be a Holocaust survivor actually is one, then who did Hitler kill? Everybody says they're a Holocaust survivor. So I said, Candace, I agree with you. A lot of them are fakes. But that just proves my point. On my mother's side of the family, one person survived, my mother. On my father's side of the family, one person survived, my father. In fact, now when I think of it in retrospect, that was one of the reasons I wasn't bar mitzvahed. Now, my parents were fanatically atheist. Don't talk about God in my home. You could not talk about God. But the other thing is the Jews among us will say the bar mitzvah was a kind of coming out party where you flaunted your success, your family wealth, and so forth to your family. I'm not invoking pity here now, I'm just speaking factually. We had no family. There was no one to invite, there was nobody to impress. There were no aunts, there were no uncles, there were no grandparents, there were no cousins, there was nothing. Because there were very few survivors. So I did what they call, I think, a jujitsu. I took her point about fake survivors and then I used it against her by saying, well, actually, you're right. Most of them were fake because very few people survived. It was very efficient what was done.
And you much better about your performance on the Candace Owens show than you seem to feel. I think, you comported yourself very, very well, and you probably made all the points that a human being could make under the circumstances. So please don't feel bad about that.
Well, I'm very good friends with, the actress from our generation, Deborah Winger. And Deborah's a very decent person, absolutely, 100%. And she was not comfortable. She said, too much, I agree.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel now I'm not in the Glenn Greenwald, category. Nick Fuentes is the smartest thing since Einstein. No, no, I'm not going there. But I do think that the left has to carve out a criticism of what's happening, that what Israel has done, what American Jewry has done, or organized American Jewry, that's distinct from the criticism that's coming from the far right now.
Yeah, I got just real quick. I want you to take a look at this. Is one of the things that popped.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I think, they'll find
that's another example. Marjorie Taylor Greene, that's another example.
this one is you take from, on anything political, you're gonna take from the person that you disagree with what you agree with, and it could be something like tax policy or whatever, and on the racist stuff, you're just gonna have to say we don't agree and see what happens, but you're not going to turn down the vote, is I guess. Anyway,
Let me put in a plug uh, for Mark Mazauer's book on anti-Semitism, and I say it because I think all of us are quite interested in being historical about these subjects. I mean, we may not, agree about how to be historical, but I think one thing us from a lot of other people is that we are being historical. And one of the things that Mazauer says that I think is relevant to Norman, to your fears about the growth of anti-Semitism in the U.S. In the period after 1945, he quotes a bunch of representatives of major Jewish organizations about the decline of anti-Semitism in the U.S. And these people are worried that anti-Semitism in the U.S. is declining because for them, the decline of anti-Semitism is a threat to Jewish identity. They're afraid that the Jews
Assimilation.
assimilate. Exactly. But about the empirical facts that anti-Semitism has in fact declined, there really doesn't seem to be any doubt. It really was happening. And Jews started to really complain about anti-Semitism at the point when barriers in employment and housing and country clubs and all that were really falling after the 1967 war, when suddenly it was like anything that was said about Israel is really anti-Semitic about us. I know, anyway.
I totally agree with that. I wrote a whole book about that. It's called The Holocaust Industry, that it all took off after the 1967 war. But what I'm saying now is all the ugliness that had been repressed and suppressed, it's all now bursting forth. And I think Tucker Carlson, it is worth listening, at least a shorter version. He has this whole monologue about Israel didn't kill these people by accident. They're not collateral damage. He says they were murdering them. This was murder. He said, you can call it genocide, you can call whatever you want. This was murder. They murdered tens of thousands of children. And of course, I agree with that. I have no problem with that. What I have a problem is to it being hitched to a right-wing agenda. And where is that going to go, especially if our economy tanks? I am concerned about where it may lead. There's a problem here. And the problem is twofold. Number one, we're nowhere in the social media, the left. A typical top 10 person gets between 1 and 2 million views per program. A person on the left gets at most 160,000. And that's the top 10, maybe even top 20. And the second thing is we don't have a clear differentiation. We haven't carved out. Yes, there's intersection in the criticism of what Israel has done, what American Jews have done. Yes, there's a lot of overlap, no question about it. Israel murdered children. Candace Owens says it. Tucker Carlson says it. Norman Finkelstein says it. No question, no dispute, no argument. So there's a factual overlap, but I would hope there is not an ideological and political overlap. And I don't think the left has contended with that problem.
Is part of the problem here that the left, as we have known it in our lifetimes, degenerated, I use that word advisedly, into an anti-imperialist movement that was satisfied with stopping the war in Vietnam, and beyond that, bracketed all the questions that had been raised in the course of the 1960s about social democracy, about a welfare state. In fact, the left was complicit in delegitimizing the welfare state as well as demonizing imperialism as such. But the point is, you can be an anti-imperialist and have no predictable political consequences. You can be a monarchist, as far as I can tell, and be anti-imperialist. So, I mean, my worry is that the phrase settler colonialism, or sheared off the adjective colonialism, has become this blanket term of condemnation that no matter where you look, it's colonial or colonialism or colonialist. Okay, fine. What are you going to do with that? Every nation that I know of, every nation state, every modern nation state is founded on a genocide. I can't think of one that isn't. I mean, maybe you guys can, but okay, what do you do then? What follows? I mean, this is
Yeah.
where I think the left has become inarticulate. Bruce.
Old argument between you and me. I'll just switch it and say you can be a really, really good social democrat and have no problem with blowing up tens of thousands of Vietnamese civilians.
I
Uh,
I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah.
Look,
so the argument goes both ways.
Yeah. The progressives were the most pro-imperialist people on the planet in the early 20th century. Yeah, I'm talking about Americans. Yeah.
I mean, you and I can.
it's part of a general problem, and the general problem is, in my opinion, that the left at one point valued intellectual endeavor, intellectual labor, um, theories, uh, polemics, and so forth. That whole tradition died. What substituted for it was these kinds of vacuous slogans like settler colonialism, certainly being one of them, heteronormativity being another one of them. You can come up with all of these slogans without content. Now, a slogan can be the end product of huge intellectual labor. So if you come up with a slogan like the right of nations to self-determination, that's a slogan. But you know what? That was the climax of huge debates over what constituted a nation. What did self-determination denote? So a slogan could be the product of huge intellectual labor, investigation, polemical exchange. There's a huge literature in the left on the right of nations to self-determination, the arguments between, well, there's 100 different schools. I'm not going to go into it now. So I'm not objecting to a slogan per se. What I'm objecting to is the slogan not being the product of the intellectual labor. The slogan thing, the only thing there is. There's no content to it. And that reached its pinnacle during the era of wokeness, which in my opinion has now passed us by in no small part because of the Trump juggernaut. And so we don't really have any significant language or theory to try to make sense of what's going on now. It's a fact, Bruce is my generation, roughly speaking. It is a fact that a large part of the left in the 1960s and 70s depended on the analyses of people like Noam Chomsky to direct them to, quote unquote, the correct position. Now, that's a good thing and a bad thing. The bad thing, obviously, is there shouldn't be a cult of authority, but that's the bad thing. But the good thing was Professor Chomsky thought through what he was doing. There was a huge amount of mental labor before he reached any conclusion. And nobody has come forward with remotely his mental capacities or commitment to trying to think through these problems. It's a complete void. Uh, it's a void in which people confuse a tweet with an argument. A tweet is not an argument. A tweet is the equivalent of a belch. It's not an argument.
And I want to see if I can introduce a somewhat more positive note here. Not about tweets in particular, but um, yes, it's true that people don't read enough. On the other hand, Norman, I was checking out your YouTube videos in preparation for this podcast, and damn, you may not have dingleberries, but videos out there, and people are watching them and listening to them and being informed, and there's some reason for feeling good about that.
I think because a lot of young people are really hungry for knowledge.
Yeah, and they
Are
know.
hungry for knowledge.
So, and hopefully Jim Livingston and David Barfield also, since their podcast is out and ready
Yeah, 60.
wave of new subscribers.
Well, I have to go now because I have to do Goyim shopping. I mean Christmas shopping.
Go out there and get them. Yeah.
My super, my porter, and my homeless friends who I give Christmas gifts to. So I have to run to Macy's and see what's on sale.
Well, you have no relatives, so you'll have to find somebody, right?
Well, I never had holiday gifts.
Yeah.
I have to. No, I won't say it in respect to my parents' memory.
Well, thanks for showing up again, and maybe we'll get another chance sometime. I guess that's anyone else have any final remarks here?
Just thanks to everybody for participating.
Yep. I wish we had more time, and
yes.
I hope
thanks, Norman.
You folks will put your minds to figuring out how do we distinguish ourselves from that surge of right-wing anti-Israel.
I think you're worried too much about Deborah Winger. The people do distinguish. They know that we're different. They know that you're different.
That's true.
Lately, Glenn Greenwald has been so singing the praises of Nick Fuentes, it's really beginning to worry me what's going on.
Yeah, and nobody takes that asshole seriously anymore, do they? I mean,
who, Greenwald?
Yeah,
people watch him.
Do they?
He's like, yeah,
he's fallen into the category of Jimmy Dore with a high school diploma.
Yeah, those guys are like they're shiny object type. I mean, literally any conspiracy theory that floats down the pike, they latch onto it like it's the word of God.
Yeah,
really embarrassing, actually. Well,
okay,
maybe we should do the show topless sometime, and we'll see what happens.
I don't think that's gonna get it, David. I don't know.
Hey, listen, I'm new to this. I don't know.
Thanks to all.
Yeah, Barry Weiss.